That tarpon gets bigger and bigger. I just want you to know. It's about 115 pounds, I think, the day that we had the clams. I just want to tell you how much I appreciate being able to be here today, how much I appreciate the support of Florida TaxWatch in this most important effort, I think, that's built around one of the most critical environmental issues of our time. Before I do that, thank you, Governor Martinez. You helped me put my first two children, my only two children, through college. So I appreciate all of your leadership and your leadership for Florida. And I hope you've forgiven the family, Governor. And that's about a spirited campaign we had back a long time ago. How many of you live on or near the coast? How many of you are familiar with harmful algal bloom issues in your area? So this is what keeps me up at night. I've been in the restaurant business for 43 years. I've lived on Anna Maria. I've always gone there since I was a young boy. And we started an organization after the 95-96 outbreak that lasted 11 months and 21 days of red tide that almost put me out of business. Lost all of our employees. We started an organization called Solutions to Avoid Red Tide at that, to work on trying to find methodologies for mitigating red tide and to educate people about what was going on with harmful algal blooms. And we're still doing that to this day. And what we've seen is that these algal blooms, not just red tide, but blue-green algae, lignia, and I don't know if I even still pronounce that right. I mangle words, and my dad was kind of famous for that. But these are occurring not only all over Florida, but they're occurring all over the country, and they are occurring more frequently, and they are lasting longer. So we need to be addressing these before they start wrecking the Florida economy, which I think we all know is built in large part on the coast. We've got some slides to illustrate some of the things. I'll ask you to go to the first slide and now go to the second slide. You sit here today on the edge of the largest Gulf in the world. You sit in the middle of the only place in the country that has 3 national estuaries on its border. Tampa Bay to the north, we're on Sarasota Bay and Charlotte Harbor to the south. These are the critical nurseries for the Gulf of Mexico, which is under great pressure. I think we all know that. What's coming out from the Mississippi River, from all the nutrients that are washing down, what's going on with upland development, what's happening with runoff from the lake, what's happening on our lawns, what's happening in stormwater management, what's happening with inadequate infrastructure around wastewater treatment systems. 40% of the nutrient loading that goes into coastal waters is from inadequate wastewater treatment systems. So there are many, many things that we need to do. And what we've got is the perfect area for a macro laboratory to prove out the science about how bivalves, filter feeders, can clean water and support one of the most important industries that we can develop in our state. Next slide. This is overlaid over the situation that we are in today, where 90+% of the seafood that we eat in these United States of America is imported. 50% of the seafood that we eat in America is aquaculture. We in America are only producing 1% of that aquaculture. Now that's a food security issue. We have been working on a biological mitigation strategy about bivalves to encourage and promote bivalve farming. We have 1 million acres of shellfish approved waters in the state of Florida where you can lease those waters, that bottom. You've got to qualify the lease through the Department of Environmental Protection to grow bivalves. 1 million acres, yet only 1/4% of that is leased. And that number is going down, not up. Why? Well, if you look at Charlotte Harbor, where 80% of the active leases in Charlotte Harbor have been abandoned. And they've been abandoned because the clam farmers don't have support. They don't have insurance like normal farmers do. If a hurricane comes and takes them out and destroys the clams on their lease, then they can get insurance. But when harmful algal blooms come and those leases get quarantined, as they should, because seafood safety is absolutely critically important, that's what Florida is all about, then those clams get too big. The market for those clams is 95% a fresh market, and it's for little necks, middle necks, and top necks, the kind of clams that I fed Dominic and Barney Barnett when they came to the restaurant, and I had the chance to been their ear about this project. When those clams get too big, there's no market for them. And when that happens, the farmer is done. He is not a fisherman. He does not go out for a week or 2 weeks. It's a 15-month crop. It's an 18-month crop. And when that lease gets abandoned, those clams could end up dying because they don't get worked. You've got to continue to separate the clams until they are large enough and make sure they're not too close together and the bags or the tarps which they are under don't get fouled. Those clams live, we hear a lot about scallops, right? Scallops are sexy and we've done a lot of scallop planning, but scallops live 13 months. They're the canary in the mine because if you sneeze, they'll fall off the branch. Clams live 35 to 60 years and they live through red tide. And they clean water 24 hours a day. They filter nitrogen, phosphorus, they eat microalgae, they eat red tide. I'm not here to claim that clams will cure red tide. Red tide's a naturally occurring organism. It will continue, but clams without doubt reduce red tide as they reduce all nutrients in the water. And when they clean water, they promote photosynthesis. And when you have more photosynthesis, then you have more seagrass. And what you want for coastal resilience and healthy estuaries to fight back against all of the things that are coming from the uplands and that are coming out of the Mississippi. And oh, by the way, when 220 million gallons of I told you I'm making words, of tailings from the gypsum stack on the northwest corner of Manatee County, 222 million gallons of that go into the water. And then you've got a red tide bloom, which we had in April when that happened. And you could ask the people in St. Pete and Pinellas and Manatee and Sarasota and Hillsborough and Collier what is going on when the dead fish wash up on their beach and what happens when all those nutrients come in. So we have got to fight back. We have got to have an answer to what's going on in the Indian River Lagoon, what's going on in Charlotte Harbor. You're all aware that we have a historic number of manatee deaths this year, almost 1,000. Never happened in the recorded history of Florida. Why are they dying? Not prop scars, not boat accidents. They're dying from starvation and suffocation. And that's a very, very sad thing. So what we're trying to do is projects to promote this. We've got a federal ask of $15 million to take these 3 national estuaries that are the perfect macro laboratory and do a project where we do up to 250 acres of shellfish beds and of seagrass restoration throughout these 3 national estuaries, all driven by science, so that we use this project to quantify, get all the scientific data. There's a lot of studies around, but to pull them all together, to be what Florida is, a leader in how we address water quality issues and coastal resilience. So we know how much a clam at 1 year nitrogen and phosphorus that it takes out of the water. How much seagrass does it promote? How does it promote forage fish habitat? And at 2 years, it's a lot more, and 3 years and 5 years, because a bigger clam cleans a lot more water and does a lot more promotion. The pseudo feces and the feces of clams fertilizes the benthic environment for the seagrass. So they're perfectly symbiotic, and they clean water all day long, all year long. And I think this is something that we can do that, go back that slide. So we started the Gulf Oyster Restoration Recycling Program in our 3 restaurants. We took 90,000 pounds of clam shells and oyster shells to be able to do a project in combination with the county and the Tampa Bay Estuaries to provide shoreline restoration and substrate. They get dried out, they get bagged up. We had 7 more restaurants join us, and now Manatee County has the biggest program in the state. When you put that substrate down, that's what that larva from a bivalve wants to land on. When it lands on that, it forms its shell, it becomes spat. That's why you see all the little growths on an oyster or a clam. Next slide. We have a nascent industry here that if we build up can provide great economic development, great jobs, and sustainable seafood. And that's what we want to be known for in Florida. We've got a clam that's a native clam, but they've never been able to propagate the commercial spawns for it before. And that's a sunray Venus clam. You see those if you walk the beach. They are sweet, they are large, chefs love them, and we're promoting that as well. Next slide. This is the oyster recycling project. Next slide. These are the groups that are aligned with us in this effort. And this is the scale up of what can happen here if we start and we turn this around and we get from 1%, less than 1% of those shellfish approved waters to 5% to 10%. And I think of this as if you look at a circle and you say the left half of the circle is about the environment and the right half of the circle is about economic development. The more jobs we create for clam farmers and for this industry, the more water we clean. And the more water we clean, the better the environment, the more we protect our tourism, the more we protect that which is precious to all of us who love Florida, the inlands and the coastal area. Then the more jobs we create, the more fishing licenses we sell, the more people we keep out of hospitals because they have respiratory problems. And that circle grows. Now, if you look at the big 4 in aquaculture, salmon, shrimp, tilapia, they've all got environmental issues. Antibiotics in the water, waste stream. Clams have none of that, right? They're just out there cleaning water. This is a project where we have, as I said, our clam farmers don't have any support. So they're getting ready to go broke when they can't get their clams off the water. Well, we started a project in 2018 when the red tide outbreak hit, was really bad in Charlotte Harbor, where we had a clam farmer, was the poster child for what we want. He was a biology major, young family, passionate about clam farming, and he can't get his clams off the bottom, and he's not going to plant another crop. He's going to go put a construction belt on, or he's going to go do something else where he has, it's not at such risk. That clam, we ought to be buying that clam, all right? That clam, I think, is a lot more valuable to the citizens of Florida and the country at large as a restoration clam living 35 more years. It's more valuable, as much as I like it, as a $16 plate of clams in my restaurant. That value, and we don't want to let that value get away from us. We want to promote that. So we ought to be buying those clams. And that's what we did. We bought 86,000 clams. We put them in Braden Beach. They're there today. They're bigger and they're cleaning water all the time. And so what we're asking the regulators to do, and what we're asking the people in the policymakers in Florida to do, is approve clams for restoration projects. And they're very amenable to doing that. What we want to do eventually is to use this science project to get clams approved for mitigation credits. You can do seagrass for mitigation credits. You can do upland restoration for mitigation credits. You can do mangroves for mitigation credits. If you want seagrass to do well, you put clams with it. So why don't we do clams? Well, the regulators will tell you we don't know how to score that. That's fine. If we can do them for restoration and we can do this project using this macro environment, then in 3 to 5 years, we can have all of that science and we can score all of that. And then we can get clams for mitigation credits. And then the policymakers don't have to tax anybody. It's going to come from municipal dollars when they're building a new bridge, or it's going to come from private projects. That's the sunray Venus clam that I talked to you about. I'd be happy to answer any questions. Yes, sir.
this program, this type of program has been successful in other parts of the country. And, it's something that, what do you see as the obstacle for people to adapt this here locally?
I think it's just getting the support of our congressional delegation. And thank you for the question, because if you want to know what you can do when you see your congressional member, when they're home on the weekends, tell them that you want them to support this project. When you're talking to your city leaders and your county leaders and they're in coastal areas, tell them that you want to see them do a clam and a seagrass restoration project. We need to work together with the Indian River Lagoon. We don't want to just do this here. And I had some very good conversations yesterday with Todd Osborne, who heads this up for IFAS and is the one heading up the projects in the Indian River Lagoon. We need to join them in on this. We need to join the Suwannee River Basin, and we need to make this a national project. We need to make this an international project. I've been invited to go to Glasgow, and I'm going to be talking about this and going there on faith and looking to collaborate with people internationally on these. There are no wild oysters left, right? All the oysters that you eat are now farmed oysters. And when I say no, there's maybe 5% of what there used to be. And the Gulf, the largest Gulf in the world, the Gulf Coast, is where the great majority of the wild oysters used to come from.
Thanks, Ed. I wanted to just share that one of the opportunities I think we have is talking to Senator Rubio about co-sponsoring the Blue Carbon for America Act, because there's a lot of opportunity along Florida's coast to do carbon mitigation credits for projects just like this. And they have been very responsive. They recognize the opportunity for Florida to join Alaska in that effort.
And we are touring, we are touring one of his top staff members in the hatchery here. Kurt Himmel, who started this Gulf Shellfish Institute, he and I started 7 years ago to promote best practices around this bivalve aquaculture. He has a hatchery. He does 80% of the bivalve seed from Maryland all the way around to Alabama. And his hatchery is a great place to come tour. We bring the policymakers or their staff in there and show them what we're doing, and we take them out on the water. I was just in Washington last week. Dominic gave me the opportunity to speak to the Florida House Board, and I got a chance to do some lobbying with the congressional members while I was there, including Peter DeFazio, who is the chairman of Transportation and Infrastructure, and he's from Portland, and he's got clam farmers, and he's familiar with the issue. I know you're short on time. I'd love to answer questions afterwards or any other questions right now if you have a minute, but thank you very much.